Hey guys, it's JD again. Welcome to another episode of For the Good of the Game. We are here in Columbus, Ohio today on the campus of Capital University, and our special guest today is the defensive line coach for Capital University's football team, my friend Keith Rucker. Keith Rucker was a 1992 graduate of Ohio Wesleyan University. He had a phenomenal athletic career at OWU, being a three-time All-American in football, seven-time All-American in track and field, as well as a national champion in track and field. He had such a successful career that he was the first in history Division III football player selected to play in the Hula Bowl All-Star game for seniors. He also had such a notable athletic career at Ohio Wesleyan. He was inducted into the OWU Hall of Fame in 2003. He went on to a very successful career in the NFL. He played with the Phoenix Cardinals, Cincinnati Bengals, Washington Redskins, and the Kansas City Chiefs. And he and his wife, Kathy, reside in Cincinnati now with their 5 children, although some are out of the house at this point. And Keith has a very successful foundation called the Reach for the Sky Foundation, which we're going to talk about a little bit at the end. So, Keith, I just want to say welcome. Thank you very much for being here, Coach.
I'm glad
it's
to
awesome
be here.
To see
glad you can make it.
Yeah. We try to start off and just basically allow each of our guests to kind of give a little bit of a short background of how they got started in football from youth ball on up, and then we'll kind of go from there and talk a little bit about all the other stuff that, we've talked prior to sitting down, but just give you the floor and let you tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, basically, I started out, my first time playing football was 6 years of age. I'm the youngest of 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls, single parent home.
Wow.
So football was my escape to get out of the house and be active. And so 6 years old, started playing football. And, of course, there was a weight limit back then. So, therefore, I was too heavy to play with the 6-year-olds, so I had to play with the 8-year-olds. So, but long story short, continued playing football all the way up until 7th grade. When I reached 7th grade and got to the middle school level, I had to go and play for a private school at that point because our junior high school didn't have football. So I went to St. Emmerich's in the south suburbs of Chicago, and they had a weight limit there as well, but you had to stripe your helmet. So there was 1 stripe on your helmet, and you could carry the ball and do everything. 2 stripes, you could only carry it on defense. If you had 3 stripes, you couldn't touch the ball if it was laying there in the middle of the field. So I mustered through that year in my 8th grade year. Couldn't wait to get to high school. High school ball, I actually attended 5 different high schools, if you can believe it.
Wow.
I went to Rich Central High School my freshman year, first semester of my freshman year. And then I ended up going to a different high school the second semester of my freshman year. Then because of the changes at the house, my brother, who was at Marquette Dental School, became my legal guardian. So I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Went to school there my sophomore year, which was my 3rd high school. Played football there, basketball, did track. So athletics have been a great building block for me. I've got several friends, fit into the community well when you get to those new schools and new faces if you're involved as I was in 3 sports. And after my sophomore year, that school shut down and turned into a school of the arts.
Wow.
Like Fame, so I didn't see myself in a tutu. So my brother busted me out to the south suburbs of Milwaukee to West Dallas Central High School. That was my junior year, 4th high school. And then at the end of that school year, my brother graduated from Marquette Dental School and moved to Cleveland, Ohio to do his dental residency.
Cool.
And so I went to my 5th and final high school, which was Shaker Heights High School up in Cleveland.
I tell you what, that's amazing. It's interesting, though, because me being retired military, and I mean, you've met most of my kids, I think.
Yes.
It's not too dissimilar from what a military brat experiences moving around a lot, So
yes.
and I agree with you 100%. The sports being the common ground is a huge equalizer.
Absolutely.
Especially if you happen to be, and I mean, I know you well enough to know you're not, but I mean, if you happen to be one of those kids that's a little awkward socially, sports
Right.
can get you over that hump.
Yeah.
So when you get through that high school experience and you're looking to go to college, you're being recruited and stuff. I wanted to be able to let you give the synoptic view of your experience because I want to come back to this at the end of our discussion with another question of how you started at Eastern Michigan and the program that you were involved in without necessarily knowing what you were getting into initially. So give you the floor and kind of describe your experience once you actually went to Eastern Michigan.
Okay. As I got to Eastern Michigan, I was one of their top 3 recruits of the 86 class. And, I was sat down with at a table with some coaches and some players. And, I was in so many words told not to worry about classes or tests, be it practice, be it games, be on time. And there was a few intangible gifts that were given to us. So, after an entire year of that program, being a 17-year-old, first time away from home, nobody to say, don't do this, don't do that, a lot of freedoms, I kind of found myself with my back against the wall because my brother, again, who raised me from Marquette Dental School, wanted grades. Well, little did I know he knew some people through the Eastern Michigan Board of Directors, and come to find out that I wasn't really even registered in the system. So once they put me in the system, and they put me in with all Fs, of course, I was given a final opportunity to maintain my scholarship, and that was to take spring and summer classes and to be able to get a C or better in those classes. And at that time, we were doing a lot of the guys on the team, it was a bunch of us in the same boat. We just spent most of our days in Detroit. So we come back for practice, go to Chow Hall, then we head back to Detroit. So that's what we were doing. And after a year of doing that, I don't think I was mentally in any position to continue my classwork. So that last chance opportunity was unsuccessful by me. So a couple of days after summer quarter ended, got a knock at the door, and it was the Eastern Michigan Public Safety, and they told me I had till the next day at noon to get my stuff out of the dorms and leave. So I had to tuck my tail between my legs, pack my car, go home and tell my mom I lost my scholarship. So
that had to have been not just the experience of the lack of accountability but as a 17, 18-year-old kid, and then, coming into the realization that, what you'd worked for pretty much your whole life since you were 6 is now, poof, it's gone. What was your mom's reaction to that when you got home?
I wasn't allowed to go back home. And then, a few months after I gotten into community college there and was in the process of proving that I was ready to go to school and do what I was supposed to the first time, she allowed me to move back in. So my brother had kind of cut ties and severed ties with me as they should have been. The opportunities that, kids are looking for now, it was in the palm of my hand. I've always been told when you get an opportunity in your hand, one or two things are going to happen. You're going to embrace it or you're going to turn it over and drop it. And if you drop it, it's going to be a hand that's so close to your hand it'll scare you. So that opportunity I dropped, but, later on, my brother was able to help me out once he knew I was serious about the opportunity, and that's, in fact, how I got linked up to Ohio Wesleyan.
That's awesome. It's Eric Thomas, the hip-hop preacher, always says, you've got to seize the opportunity of a lifetime within the lifetime of that opportunity.
Absolutely.
And you were blessed in terms of having family and friends around you that could support you to create a second opportunity.
Absolutely.
Now you got transfer and a new beginning at Ohio Wesleyan, arguably what I would certainly call, in quotes, a storied career there, both as a football player and as a track and field star.
Yes.
I'd love for you to be able to recap a little bit of that career, but also in the context of, hey, I've got a new beginning. I am going to make this work. How was that start for you?
It was tough in the beginning because I went back to it was more of a structured environment than the community college I was at, but class size was about the same. Teachers taking attendance, accountability was the same. So in that aspect, it was kind of normal, but I guess the biggest issue with me was the getting back into the swing of a true schedule of classes, studying, going to bed, classes, studying, going to bed. Whereas when I was at the community college, as I spoke to you earlier, I worked from 8 at night to 4 in the morning at the Dunkin' Donut, and then at in the morning at 8 o'clock when I got off, I'd go home, shower, sleep a couple hours, and then I would go to the community college for 4 or 5 hours for classes. And so the adjustment when I got back to Ohio Wesleyan was just getting on a different schedule and being able to organize and use my time wisely, which I was able to do. And I mean, the rest is really history. That it was quite an adjustment to get back into it, but once I got into a flow and got around certain people, the right people, that helped out a lot as well.
When you look back on it now, and after you got into the swing of that at OWU and things began to, come around and you were experiencing some success, when you look back on it now, what lessons learned that you went through with that experience do you share with your current athletes, either when you're recruiting them or guys that are in the program that may be struggling?
Well, one of the main things I talk to them about is my role as their coach. I have the same conversation with my kids, and usually my recruits, the last thing I tell them before they leave campus from visiting is there's 2 things that you should never base your decision to go to a university or college upon, and that is the coach that's there because he can get fired or move on, or just because singly of football, because football can end. We all know it takes one play and it could be done.
Sure.
And so those kids shouldn't leave and go home because they're not playing football. They should come there and finish what they started, which was to be a student athlete. That's how you get a degree. You got to be a student first with the privilege to be an athlete, and so that's usually the advice I give the kids before they leave campus, as well as my kids at home. I give them the same conversation. You're gonna have more freedom, so you got to find a way to make the right decisions. And if you make the wrong decisions, just don't make it again.
Well, certainly, I think for all of us, and we have 4 kids that are all adults and have finished college, but that was always a strong message with us too. Mistakes are okay. You win or you learn.
Yes.
And when you learn, whether it be a loss on a field court or diamond or whatever, just don't make that mistake twice.
Again,
so I agree.
Absolutely.
When you talk about transitioning after and we'll come back briefly. I want to talk a little bit more about the OWU piece, but for transitioning, when you leave Ohio Wesleyan and get into the NFL and you are playing, what challenges from a scheme perspective, as well as how they wanted to employ you, a big man by all means on height and weight at that point, and being able to leverage your physical abilities and your talent at that level to play in the NFL. And if you could weave a little bit into it, do you think that your experiences in track and field, because of the balance, the footwork, the weight training and everything, contributed to your success specifically as a defensive lineman when you got to that level in the NFL? I mean, schematically, whether it be, the plan itself or just surviving,
Yeah, and interesting you bring that up. As I'm sitting there thinking, my rookie year, when I got to the Arizona Cardinals, I was 360 plus. And my name was dangling off the depth chart. I was a free agent from a Division III college, and I'm playing with guys that I used to watch on TV every Saturday, as well as the year I came into the Cardinals, there were 7 other D linemen that came in that year, just that year. And so we had probably, I want to say 16 or 17 defensive linemen to start camp, and they were only going to keep 7 or 8. And so I knew I had to, I thought, man, what was my agent thinking, putting me in this situation? But what ended up transpiring is back then in training camp, we used to bang. We used to get to show what we can do on a Sunday, whereas now it's more of almost a 2-hand touch deal. But, back then I was able to actually go against some veterans, show my worth, show that I can compete at that level. And so, like my first week in the NFL, I ended up we was going to Tampa Bay. I went there and Coach Cottrell said, hey, you got to get ready to go. We're going to need you tomorrow. I played 2 snaps, and they were both like field goal blocks. And then the next week I got released because our running back was holding out, so they wanted to bring him in. I was a low man on the totem pole. So they released me that week. And then the next week we came back, and they re-signed me. We played the Washington Redskins, and I played against I forget his name, went to Ohio State, big tackle there. But I ended up having 8 tackles and 2 sacks in that game. And then we had a bye week the following week. And then the 5th week, they entirely changed from a 3-4 defense to a 4-3 defense so that I could start inside with Eric Swan. And that's how my rookie season started.
Interestingly enough, did Coach Cottrell have anything to do with that?
I guarantee you he did. He's a great guy. I love him to death. He got the right group of guys together when we were in Arizona.
Yeah.
We had a great group. We had fun. We worked. And I know Emmitt Smith personally doesn't like the Arizona Cardinals and my 3 years there, 6 games, he never rushed for 100 yards against us in a game.
I remember sending you a text. It was years ago, but you put a picture on social media of you crushing Emmitt.
Yes.
And I said, hey, don't pick on the little guys, So I think that, and that, would you say contextually in terms of what you learned doing track and field, specifically field events and shot put, do you think that in terms of in the line play, low man wins, leverage is king, power. Do you think that power and leverage that you had to get in those helped you out?
Absolutely. I mean, and I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but I also played basketball in college my senior year. So a lot of that, the basketball footwork, being able to dunk at 360 pounds, the shot put and discus and track workouts. I mean, I was actually doing indoor track and basketball at the same time. So a lot of it was the carryover. It helped me with my endurance, my stamina, definitely my footwork, because that's one of the things that Ted Cottrell and staff at the Cardinals told me. They was like, one of the reasons you made this team is because of your footwork. We've never seen a guy that big, that athletic, and can play sideline to sideline. So those little intangibles that were brought about by a totally different sport and animal was I think what helped me have an opportunity to play in the NFL.
It is great that you bring that up, because one of the topics that we've talked about in numerous episodes so far, is the fact that a lot of Division I coaches now, and certainly a lot of high school coaches, but mainly the college guys, and even some of your NFL coaches, are really starting to speak out very vocally, men's and women's sports, saying that the best athletes are the ones that play multiple sports.
Absolutely.
And not only for all those reasons you said, but it also gives you something to do. I see there was a study recently, I think it was 2018, that was done by the Aspen Institute, and they gave all these stats about youth in the country by age, by year, and so on in terms of development. And one of the things that they talk about in the study is the degree to which kids start dropping out. And the ones that do play multiple sports succeed for 2 big reasons. One, they get the diversity of the athletic training,
right.
So the kind of thing you described, and their bodies get a chance. It's not repetitive muscle movement all the time, so your body gets a chance to rest. Even though you're doing another sport, it's a different motion.
Different motion.
Yeah,
movement.
absolutely.
Yep.
When you look back on the experience you just spoke about with Coach Cottrell and the Cardinals, and then as you think back and you transition, it arguably statistically had 2 of your best years with the Bengals, your 3rd and 4th year in the league. How has the defensive game evolved from when you played, based on what you just described, making the roster because you had those advantages, to today's now, when guys look across the landscape at the Jadeveon Clowneys and J.J. Watts and the Bosa brothers and these kids that are coming in that are just freak athletes, and I say that with all due respect. How has that game on the defensive side of the ball evolved from when you played, do you think?
I think is really evolved into, I mean, you hear it all the time, the bigger, faster, stronger. And these guys now are bigger, faster, stronger. Just as back when I played, I was probably looked at kind of like a freak of nature to be 360 pounds, 6'4", dunk a basketball, and everything that I did. So I think now they're just adding a little more freakishness to it because – and, I mean, I did a couple internships with the Bengals and the Jets in 2014 and 15, and I look back now, and the biggest difference was like looking at the offensive linemen back when I played. They probably averaged 6'4", 330, 40 pounds. Now these guys are 6'7", 6'8", and still 340, 50 plus. But just I sit sometimes and wonder, how would I defend that guy? I mean, I've already won the leverage battle, but that's a whole lot more height and weight to try to push around. And some of my best battles was with Nate Newton, who was about my size when we played. And, so nowadays it's like trying to defend a basketball player or a track guy that's in the 3-point stance on as far as the offensive lineman to the defensive lineman. But the game is it's changed so much. I mean, the positions, the skill levels of the players, and I guess, and I'll keep saying this, the only thing that I kind of dislike about where the league has gone to now is that they don't practice like they used to, and that I think that is why we have so many of the injuries and stuff that we're having.
Yeah, I certainly can't argue at the level of the NFL, obviously, because I haven't played or coached there. But in terms of what I see with this move more and more now, even at the high school and college level, where coaches are preserving health and well-being, if you will, by not having as many contact days, or at least full contact days. And I don't know, good and bad. I mean, I've been disconnected from high school ball for about 3 years now. And I you obviously have been at that level, coached extensively, to include being a head coach. And I just have always thought there's no substitute for good, hard, clean contact. Now, do you take some risks? Absolutely. But, that's translated over now to where guys are saying, well, I'm going to sit out of the bowl game or the playoff game if I'm a first or second round pick,
Absolutely.
So I see how it's happened. But I understand the evolution of the game, continues to change on a lot of different levels. So since we're on that topic, you look at the recent rule changes, and they've done some things to help speed up the game and to help protect players. I mean, back in the day, when you had guys coming across the middle, and I always think back to the hit by Quentin Correa. Those kinds of really torturous. I mean, football's a violent game, but when you get through all of that, what do you think now, looking back at how you played and the era you played in? Good, bad, or indifferent in terms of the quality of play and how it affects the game when you start having things like the targeting rule where, and I understand if it's malicious, I got no problem with that, but there's a lot of calls that are really judgment calls now that are changing the complexion of a game. I mean, what do you think about that?
In the beginning, I was all for, especially the rule changes that brought more safety to the game, all for it. As we get into creating more rules and more updates to the way the game is played, it's starting to get pretty watered down to the point, like you just mentioned, a lot of these calls, they're so questionable and can change the outcome of a game. But at the same time, safety has to be in the forefront, because we got a lot of guys out here who are, struggling with the concussions. And for instance, I'd had a year where they had me on the kickoff return team at Cincinnati, and I never realized how bad of a situation you are put in when you're running backwards to try to get to a point and to turn around and see a guy standing 3 yards away from you who's got about a 40-yard sprint going. And that's not safe. So when you talk about how they're like the kickoff rule, giving yourself up, I think the next step is going to be to totally take kickoff out of the game, start the ball at the 25. So I think that's something that can continue helping the safety of the game, because how many returns do you see a game? 1 or 2? It's like a waste of time almost. But the safety, going back to the safety, like the targeting, I like that rule just because of the fact, if the guy can't see this car crash coming, then he's going to be hurt. And like you said, even Q's hit that he had, that one, and you look at all of the ones where guys are pursuing a guy that just got an interception, and you got that offensive lineman that's just beaming in on you, and you don't even see him. You're looking at the ball carrier. So those rules, there's some good and some bad, and again, as long as safety is the forefront of the decision, then I support that.
As you might expect, when I recently interviewed Billy Whiteshoes, of course, his intent was to change the complexion of the game with his returns.
Yes.
So he wasn't a real big fan of this, take the kickoff out of the, of course, punt return would still theoretically be in there, but it depends on your perspective. And I did tell him, I said, I certainly understand that. Overall, as an old school fan of the game, and be it that, I played up through 2 years of college, I certainly experienced how that can swing a game, and I'm a little ambivalent. I really like the idea of being able to shift the game, whether you catch the ball and return it successfully or you fumble the ball and the defense gets the momentum.
Right.
But, eventually I tend to agree with you. I think that it will eventually either go away or some form or fashion of it will be replaced so that we do preserve the safety. And and that's not a bad thing. So what about in terms of the landscape of the game changing? Now, and I said I wanted to come back to this, given your start at Eastern Michigan, you now have a movement that started in California with the House and Senate passing and the governor signing a law, and then the NCAA finally flipped and said, okay, we'll look into it. This rule that they're looking into the possibility of allowing players to receive compensation for their name and likeness. Now, I want to clarify something because we've talked about this on a couple episodes. It doesn't say they're going to get it from the school.
Right.
It's more like an endorsement deal type of thing.
Yes.
So, given what you went through, and wink, wink, nod, nod, I think anybody that's played major college football, it probably knows that kind of thing in one form or fashion has been going on for years.
Yep.
What do you think about this particular piece of evolution of the game, given what you went through, and could it be good, bad, or
I personally feel like it would be good for the game. I do, just because, the behind the closed door things that are going on, the under the table handshakes and stuff like that. I think all of that stuff can be eliminated, as well as I think it will eliminate the alums, or whatever the word you want to use is, for the big donors to the school, from them having their hands involved in these football programs of these young kids who, money makes the world go around. So why don't we just pay them for what they're doing and what they're bringing to the game from these endorsements and these companies, versus it coming from some alum's hand or however, it's been in the past. But I would totally be for that, just because it allows that kid to be a student, to be an athlete, not worry about, like if you look at the thing that Ohio State went through with the tattoos and all of that stuff a few years ago with Terrell Pryor. Those are the kind of things that can be, I think, alleviated if they do go and that bill passes.
Well, and I think that, there are many, many situations, and we've seen it happen all the time. Just because a guy gets drafted doesn't necessarily mean he goes into a system and a situation that is going to be suited to him. And there's a lot of guys that get drafted that don't pan out, and largely influenced by either the coaches or the system didn't suit what they could do.
Absolutely.
The other piece is there's a lot of guys that do very well in college and never go on to play in the NFL and could absolutely benefit from receiving that compensation, knowing that either they don't want to or don't have the projection to be a pro athlete in that sport. I just think it opens up, and when you look back at, I can't remember his name, Tim something, there was a guy who played for the Falcons who was still in college but was a track star and was returning kicks for the Atlanta Falcons. And you've got Russell Wilson, who played baseball. You've got the Cardinals new quarterback, the rookie this year,
Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murray. He had a baseball contract before he actually, graduated from Oklahoma. So all kinds of dynamics that many, many more kids could benefit from, not just the superstars.
Yes,
and I think that's kind of cool.
I agree.
I want to get to the real piece of this foundation that you've been a part of for a number of years. And of course, I've known about it. I've talked to you about it. I understand some of what you do, certainly with the big camp every year, and we've talked about that. But kind of give the audience, it's the Reach for the Sky Foundation.
Reach for the Sky Youth Foundation.
And if you would, kind of go through the why, the what, and the how long. What you guys do, what kind of benefits you provide to kids, who the focus is, and things like that.
Okay, well, it all started in 2004. That was our first year. The year before that, I was working at a former NFL guy's football camp, and working the camp, you had a duty. Mine was to cross the kids and the parents from the parking lot up to the field. So I'm stopping the cars to let cars go by. One van pulls up, it's like 4 boys in there, and only one got out. And he went up the hill, Dad went and parked, and he's walking with the other 3. And I'm like, and I was joking with the kid. I was like, man, you guys don't like football? And they were like, yeah, we love football. And the dad was like, yeah, it costs to go to this camp, $300. So the one I let up the hill, he's going this year. He'll go next year. He'll go the next year. And I was like, so I went home, immediately talked to my wife. I was like, I said, I want to do something for the three in the car that couldn't get out. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is I started talking to my brother who's a CPA and one of his buddies that's a lawyer. They started a 501c3 for me. And, and I had a business card that was made prior to that when I was doing high school ball. And it had a bunch of hands like reaching up to a skyline of a downtown building. Mm-hmm. And that's why I said, reach for the sky, some incentive for kids.
Absolutely.
So that next year, what I did is I started a camp, and we started it at our residential park. And it was 48 kids, and I had about 20 coaches. I had so many coaches. We had fun, and we made it fun for the kids. The coaches started playing around with the kids. So it was cool. So we started that. The camp was totally free. We feed them breakfast and lunch with donations from General Mills and some local residential venues that have really came on board and supported us this entire time. But so we're able to do that. And my biggest expense every year is T-shirts. So basically we purchase the T-shirts. Kids get a T-shirt when they register. They get breakfast and lunch every day. And it's a 2-day camp. And a lot of people say, why do you do a 2-day camp? I say, well, a lot of guys do a 1-day camp. And you don't know what those kids' retention rate is because they didn't come back until a year later to come back to the camp again. So I want kids that when they leave on Saturday and come back Sunday, I want them to be able to do what they did on Saturday quicker. And that's how we test their knowledge and how their retention was. So with that being said, the next year we did the camp again and started in Chicago where I grew up at. Mm-hmm. And in the second year, we did one in Chicago and Cincinnati. So every year we do 2 camps there. I also do guest speaking events. We go out and do charity work. We work with some of the autism foundations. So the foundation as a whole is now totally ran by our community. And it's unbelievable. And it started in Chicago. A lady came up to register her son, and she dropped him off at the registration table, like pulled up. And she was like, what time's the camp over? I told her what time. I said, it's from 8 to noon, free breakfast, lunch. We need you to come register. And she's like, what's the camp called? I said, Reach for the Sky. Who run it? I said, me, Keith Rucker. She was like, Keith Rucker from Page Street? Hold on a minute. She went and parked her car. And every year in Chicago, since then, she's been volunteering.
No kidding. Isn't that awesome?
It is.
That is so cool.
I go back to Chicago, my family, we cook out. I have a following to both camps. I have family to come from Chicago to work the Cincinnati camp Memorial Day. And then we have about usually 20 rooms in Chicago with the people that follow me from Ohio to Chicago.
That's outstanding.
So, and we've been, this was our 15th year. And it's been great. We're geared up and ready to go. I got a text message from my cheer coordinator because the camp, what we do at the camps is football and cheer. Mm-hmm. And it's fundamental. You have coaches there that are teaching, and we go from ages 6 through 14. So basically first grade to high school, basically. And my staff does an outstanding job. It's to the point I used to do everything, and now I just kind of ride around on a golf cart looking good now. So that's what I try to do. But I love the foundation. I love what it stands for. And my biggest bonus is that that I get out of it is that the community runs it.
That's awesome.
It's not about Keith Rucker. I mean, my name has not been on the shirts and the signs for years. And it's just Reach for the Sky. And that's what it's about. And our foundation motto is actually, it's all about the kids. And so giving them an opportunity to get that same coaching that somebody else had to pay for gives them an even playing field. With basketball, we did football, we did basketball one year, we did soccer one year, and what we're hoping to eventually grow into when our funding gets to that point is to actually be able to go do some classroom stuff, some
awesome.
Computer stuff. And that's where we're at. But the foundation is rolling, it's doing well, and I love it. I look forward to it every year, and so do all the fans. We started out with those 48 kids, and now we average at each camp about 325 to 350 kids.
What venues are you using nowadays?
In Cincinnati, I use Princeton High School, which is my residential school where I've coached and taught at. And in Chicago, it's in the south suburbs. It's called the Matson Community Center. And I was home. I was home one year and just visiting. And I was going up to my mom's house and rode past, and I'm looking at all these lights, and you can see it's like fields. Mm-hmm. And so at this point now, this is in the beginning. So we started out doing it at a high school in Chicago, in my hometown, and the mayor was invited to come out and speak at my opening camp. Mm-hmm. Came out and left, disappeared, didn't know why. So finally found out one of his assistants told me he left because his name wasn't on my shirt. So I said, really? He's like, yeah. So I said, okay, well, I said, do me a favor. Tell Mayor Kellogg, if he wants his name on my shirt, donate $1,000 to the foundation, and we'll put his name wherever he wants it on the shirt. And so now at this point, the facility I'm using is free. Next year, what do you think they charge me?
$1,000.
$1,000. And so I ended up moving it to a different park. We just found a park, got portalets, and we had camp. We was going to have camp, so we did that a couple years. And then I was doing a Chicago Bears youth clinic. I was speaking, and I was talking to these guys, and they was telling me, it was like, yeah, where you from? I said, from the south suburbs. It's like, really? We are too. So we started talking. They're like, we're from Homewood Flossmoor. I said, well, the house is catty corner to the high school? I said, that's where I live. And they were like, really? And I was telling them about my camp. I said, yeah, I did it in Harvey up at Thornton, and the mayor did this and mayor did that. He was like, really? He was like, well, where are you having it now? I said, I'm still looking for a home. And this guy was like, we got about 6 soccer fields, lined, everything you need. Gave me his card. We had it there for about 3 or 4 years after that. And the last year we had it there, the parking lot flooded. It rained so much the parking lot flooded, so we had to cancel camp that day. And so I'm riding out to my mom's house, and I see these fields in this big building. So I go in and talk to the guy. He's like, yeah, Dwayne Wade has his basketball academy here. And the White Sox and the Cubs do a camp here as well. We're looking for football. I'm like, all right. He said, so now all of these services you told me you provide for the kids, how much does a camp cost? I said, $0. He was like, wait a minute. You going to feed them breakfast and lunch, give them a T-shirt, Camper of the Day awards, and our awards look like Heisman trophies. So the kids love
cool.
it, and we give away some gift cards. And we always talk to the kids about the Camper of the Day award is not for the best athlete. It's for a kid that 10 kids may walk over that cup. That kid, that 11th kid that picked that cup up, that's who I'm going to recognize.
That's cool.
So, but that's where we've been there ever since. So this is probably our 8th year there at the Matson Community Center. But it's a great venue. They have the indoor facilities in case inclement weather. We've only had to do that once. So other than that, we've been blessed to have outstanding weather every time we go to Chicago and the ones in Cincinnati. So it's really nice. Love it.
Well, I've said this to you before, and the times that we've talked about it a couple of times in the past just never made it connect. But, at some point in the future, I certainly want to be involved in whatever capacity you could use me. So I want to do something here kind of to wrap up called the 2-minute drill, appropriate for football guys.
Yes.
But this is just some about 8 questions on, just different things related to football, but in and out. So first off, leading off, if you have one, starting in, you said 6 years old playing football. I started in 3rd grade myself, so I was pretty young. What was your favorite youth sports memory if you have one?
It would probably be, we were practicing, again, I played with the older kids, and I just remember we had this kid named Charlie Carter, and nobody could tackle Charlie. And so my coach was like, the first person tackle Charlie Carter, I'm taking you to Jack in the Box. And I just remember I was getting double teamed and somehow split the double team, and Charlie Carter peeked his head through that hole, and I just laid him out. And the coach picked me up, and I was like, we won the Super Bowl. And the greatest part to this day, John, he comes to my camp every year.
That's outstanding.
Every year he's been there since the first year. And I remember talking about my son, who we was talking about earlier, who's a senior now, when he was 3. And my Coach Mays said, he was like, man, that little kid right there, he got some good form and technique. And my brother was like, Coach Mays, that's Keith's son. He was like, that boy gonna play on Sundays. So and that's why I do what I do, because my most influential people besides my mom and my brother, my football coaches and my PE teachers in school. So that's kind of the pattern I took, teaching and coaching at the high school level, and now going to the next level, and loving working with kids.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that most of the guys that I've talked to, and certainly myself, case in point, is the same way. The people that influenced me the most, besides my parents, were those coaches,
Yep.
for sure. What about favorite play, game, or event from your college career? And I know, obviously, with all those 14 All-Americans and being a national champion, both, track and field and football, you have a favorite game or event or anything that stands out?
As far as games, it would be hard. What I would say is my favorite memory from college was actually getting to go to Hawaii to play in the Hula Bowl, because again, we played at 11 o'clock on Saturdays, and when our game was over, we went home and watched the big boys play on TV. Mm-hmm. And to actually be on the same field with those guys was a heck of a honor. And being able to, they flew my mom out, my brother, my sister, my nephew, stayed in Waikiki, and a little poor kid from Chicago was in Hawaii. So we had a great time. I enjoyed it. Got to meet a lot of people who are still good friends with me to this day, the Carlos Snows and the Von Dunbars. And it was, and probably a third of the guys that I played on the East team with, I've either played with or played against when we were in the league. And
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's amazing. I was, everybody's like, can you tell me the defense, who was on the defense at the Hula Bowl? I said, yeah, to blow your mind. It was Roy Barker from North Carolina, Larry Webster from Maryland, Brad Culpepper from Florida. Our linebackers were Keith Goganis, LaVon Kirkland, and Rico McDonald. So, and then we had our cornerbacks with Steve Israel. And these are all guys, probably most of those guys went in the first two rounds.
Sure. Some very notable names.
Yeah, absolutely. So that would probably be my biggest moment from college.
Yeah, it's interesting because Coach Cottrell was talking about when he was in the linebacker room for the Falcons, and he's looking around the room, and they say, "Where are you from?" He says, "Delaware College." Is that in Delaware? No, it's in Pennsylvania. So yeah, I hear you.
I got that all the time.
Yeah.
What's the name of that school you say you went to? I'm like, okay.
Nowadays, what's your favorite non-football activity?
Nowadays, the biggest thing is spending time with my family. I like to. We're a Netflix family, so we watch a lot of movies and series and spending time together, and I get to do that when I work out. That kind of runs the time a little faster for me when I'm doing an hour of cardio, if I can watch my iPad and watch some Netflix.
There you go.
Family time.
Do you have, with the 4 teams you played for during your career in the NFL, do you have anybody that sticks out in your mind as a best NFL teammate?
Best NFL teammate. Yeah, he's passed on now, but I would say Derek Brooks from the Kansas City Chiefs. He was just avid professional, man. He really took care of guys, especially the new guys that came in. Mm-hmm. He's like, hey, this is what we do. This is how we do that. If you need anything, let me know. He's been known to he took guys to his house that were living in a hotel until they could find a place. He's like, you don't need to spend the money. You come to my house, ride in with me, or use one of my cars. So, and to be fair, I've had one of those guys on every team I played on. On the Cardinals, it was Louis Sharp. On the Bengals, it was I would probably have to go with Leonard Wheeler. He was real good to me when I first got there. And then again on the Chiefs, it was DT. And on the Washington Redskins, it was probably Darryl Green, because he was the first guy at the facility, last guy to leave, and it was unbelievable to watch him the year I was there as a 38-year-old man run a 4.3 40.
And I saw him on the sidelines this past bowl season.
Oh yeah,
and he looked like he could still
play.
Run it. Yeah, absolutely. What about favorite movie? Since you said you're a Netflix family, you got one that sticks out as your favorite?
I'm like a a action drama kind of guy. So like there's a few series that I've watched that kind of were high on my list, like Queen of the South. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's about a no-name young lady who becomes like the head of this cartel over in Bolivia or somewhere. I mean, and it's full of action. It was ever changing who was in control and who was fighting who, and it's just one. And I like the action part of it because that keeps me involved with it. So
that's cool. That's cool. What about? And you mentioned at least one previously, but at any level, favorite coach or coaches that you feel like had a major impact on you?
Probably the biggest one was my college coach, which was Bruce Tall. He coached at West Virginia for some years with Rodriguez, but he was a guy that when I was in college, he went and actually did like 3 or 4 internships the last 2 years I was in college to find out what I needed to have an opportunity. Because when the scouts started kind of coming in looking, he was like, oh, maybe he do have a chance, So he went out and did interns, came back, hey, this is what you need to be working on. And that kind of stood out to me.
That's impressive.
And then as far as the pros, I would probably say definitely Ted Cottrell, because he was that father that I've never had. My dad passed away when I was a year old. So he was, I still call every time I call him. I'm like, hey, Pops, what's going on? Him and Mama C. So, we grew a relationship because he if we did wrong, he put his foot on our neck. And then if we did what we were supposed to do, not all the time, but most of the time he gave us a pat on the back. You know what I'm saying? But he explained to us, hey, I'm not going to pat you on the back for something I expect you to do. But he was also a guy that would sit down and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what's getting ready to happen. And it was that kind of father-son talk. So that's why I've always looked up to him through this, the interview process, looking for jobs. I constantly call him, hey, you got any suggestions? What do I need to do? You got somebody I need to call, or he'll call me and say, hey, have you thought about talking to so-and-so? So when I was doing my internships with the NFL teams, he was, a major contributor in me getting that done because he was like, nope, don't fill out that application. Call this guy. He's going to send you some paperwork. You fill out that, and then that way he can bring it up in the meeting, and that's when it started. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
It's nice to have that kind of resource.
Absolutely.
So
and not only, when you see somebody going out of their way, but that you also, as the old saying goes, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to see when somebody has your back like that. So what about favorite snack food?
Ooh, I'm not a snack guy.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people say that too. They're like, big as you are, you gotta, because like over in the cafeteria, they got all the cookies and the what do you call them, lemon cake and all of that. I've just never been a real dessert guy. My wife beats me up every time she come to visit because her and my youngest, we gotta go sit at Grader's for an hour. And so I'm like,
get a little bit of that ice cream.
So every now and then I'll do some ice cream, but I'm not a big snack guy.
Well, there's a lot of people nowadays that aren't. So, we'll see what happens. I know that I have been trying to lay off because as I get older, inflammation is not my friend. And that sugar just kills you with the inflammation. What about next to last question, but in terms of the 2-minute drill, do you have a greatest NFL game memory that stands out in your mind? Not necessarily that you did, but that you were a part of, as a teammate or on a play or whatever?
I think the thing that sticks out most to me is a lot of people always ask about, and that was my first NFL sack. I got my first NFL sack, and, we always practice, hey, this is what I'm going to do when I get my sack. And so I don't know what it looked like to this day, but all I know is Fritz Shermer pulled me out of the game. That after that play was over, he pulled me over to the sideline. I go over. He was like, hey, put his arm around me. He's like, let me tell you something, rookie. He said, you just looked at like an idiot out there, whatever that was that you did. He said, so here's my advice to you. Act like you've done it before. And I was like, and it took me, I'm not going to lie, it took me probably a year to process. I wasn't even hearing him at that point because that was my first sack. I'm like, yeah, that's what, and I wasn't a pass rusher. So, yeah, I get a sack. I'm going to be good. Later in my career, we played against the Steve Youngs and the Dan Marinos. Keith Rucker had a baseball hat on, chilling on the sideline. because I'm not a pass rusher, but that's one of the moments that stick out the most with me with Fritz.
That's awesome.
He was a great guy.
That's a great story. Coach, as a means to finish up, we selected the name For the Good of the Game for a reason, because one of the big long things that I'm working on long term, I should say, is to try and reduce the statistic that 70% of kids in the United States stop playing youth sports by the time they're 13 years old. And so under the theory of For the Good of the Game, if you were talking to one of your kids when they were younger, or the younger Keith Rucker, just from a general athletic standpoint, but with a football focus, what would you tell a kid nowadays in terms of, hey, if you want to have athletic success as well as life success, here are some things you need to think about based on your experience?
I would basically talk to them about being a good person, first of all, and just what playing any sports and being the best at it entails. So from the hard work, learning how to face adversity. I talk to my kids all the time about, when things get harder, you just got to dig your heels in a little deeper and keep going. And the game of football to me is life on the 120-yard field. You're going to get knocked down, or you're going to get back up. Somebody's going to cheap shot you, hit you after the whistle. Are you going to retaliate and be the one that gets caught, or are you going to say whistle to whistle mentality? And those are the things that I would talk to the kids about, or even my kids. And that is just basically understanding that this game is going to teach you a lot about life, but it also is going to bridge some gaps and make some connections and some relationships that you'll have the rest of your life.
I agree with you 100%. In fact, I've told people it's interesting to me because so many times I've talked about the fact that so many of the lessons from a leadership and accountability, responsibility standpoint that I used when I was in the Army, I learned playing football growing up.
Yes, sir.
And I think it encapsulates what so many of us go through in life, the challenges, the life skills that we learn. And I appreciate you being able to share your unique experiences and be able to bring several things into light that I think are worthwhile, not only for younger kids, but for parents nowadays to hear as well. Yeah. So they kind of know what to look out for.
Absolutely.
So, Coach, I tell you what, I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you too, man. I enjoyed it.
Oh, it was awesome. It's great to not only catch up, but to see you again. And I'll look forward to, staying in touch and hopefully at some point in the future being involved with the foundation as well, one of the camps.
We'd love to have you, man. It's a lot to do, and we have a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, listen, guys, this has been a great interview. We appreciate Coach Rucker being here. Wish him all the luck in the world. I just want to say, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure that you take time to watch some of the other episodes. And remember, when you're out there doing things for football, no matter what you do it for the good of the game. We'll see you next time. Take care.